First contact and deception. Dr. Elena Rees squinted at her computer screen, her eyes burning from hours of analyzing anomalous energy readings. The data streaming in from the new Deep Space Observatory was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Impossibly coherent patterns pulsed across her display, defying every known law of physics. "Dr. Harrison, you need to see this," Elena called out, her voice echoing through the nearly empty control room. The elderly astrophysicist ambled over, his curiosity piqued by the urgency in Elena's tone. As he leaned in to examine the screen, his eyes widened. "Good Lord," he whispered, "it's as if the fabric of space itself is being manipulated." Before either scientist could speculate further, a blinding flash filled the observatory. When their vision cleared, they found themselves face to face with beings that, until that moment, they would have sworn could not exist. Standing before them were what could only be described as fairies, ethereal, luminous creatures with gossamer wings and eyes that sparkled with ancient wisdom. The leader, a tall figure with silver hair that seemed to float on an unseen breeze, stepped forward. "Greetings, humans," the fairy spoke, its voice melodious and soothing. "I am Lysander, emissary of the Fae realm. We come in peace, seeking friendship with your kind." In the days that followed, the world was turned upside down. News of the fairies' arrival spread like wildfire, captivating the imaginations of billions. Governments scrambled to establish diplomatic relations, while the scientific community burned with questions about the nature of fairy magic and the hidden realm from which they came. Lysander and his delegation moved with grace through the halls of the United Nations, charming world leaders with their otherworldly beauty and promises of shared knowledge. They spoke of a long history of observing humanity from their cloaked realm, praising human ingenuity and expressing a desire to learn from Earth's technological marvels. Dr. Elena Rees found herself at the center of it all, appointed as the lead scientific liaison to the fairy delegation. She worked tirelessly, coordinating teams of researchers from every scientific discipline to study and document fairy abilities. "It's extraordinary," Elena explained to a panel of wide-eyed politicians. "Their magic appears to be a form of energy manipulation at the quantum level. They can alter probability fields, manipulate matter at its most fundamental state. The potential applications are, well, they're limitless." As weeks turned to months, a cautious optimism swept across the globe. Fairies integrated into human society, offering healing to the sick, purifying polluted environments, and even assisting in space exploration. In return, humans shared their technology. Smartphones, computers, and the internet became objects of fascination for the magical beings. Yet beneath the surface of this newfound harmony, shadows lurked. In the fairy embassy, behind doors warded with powerful enchantments, Lysander met with his inner circle. Gone was the benevolent smile he wore for humans, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "The humans suspect nothing," Lysander said, his voice now sharp and commanding. "Their technology is impressive, yes, but they are like children playing with toys they do not fully understand. They pose no real threat to our kind." A younger fairy area spoke up hesitantly. "But Lysander, they've welcomed us with open arms. Is conquest truly necessary? Perhaps we could genuinely cooperate, learn from each other." Lysander's eyes flashed dangerously. "Do not let the hospitality fool you, Area. Humans are a chaotic, destructive species. Given time, they would bring ruin to our realm as they have to their own world. No, it is better we strike now, while they are still blinded by our illusions of friendship." He waved his hand, and a shimmering map of Earth appeared in the air before them. "Our agents are in place in every major city. Military bases, power plants, communication hubs, all have been thoroughly infiltrated. When the time comes, we will strike swiftly and decisively." As the fairies plotted humanity's downfall, Dr. Elena Rees worked late into the night in her lab. She couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. The fairies were always eager to demonstrate their magical abilities, but became evasive when asked about the underlying principles. Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard, compiling data from thousands of recorded fairy performances. As complex algorithms crunched the numbers, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the analysis again. But the results were the same. The fairies' magical abilities, while impressive, showed clear limitations. More importantly, there were inconsistencies that suggested they were actively hiding the full extent of their capabilities. Just as Elena was about to contact her superiors with her findings, the lights in her lab flickered and died. Emergency sirens blared in the distance, and through her window, she saw flashes of otherworldly light illuminating the night sky. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Dr. Harrison, his voice trembling with fear. "Elena, are you seeing this? It's happening everywhere. The fairies, they're attacking. God help us all." As the realization of their betrayal sank in, Elena's mind raced. The fairies had played them all for fools, using humanity's openness and curiosity against them. But she knew something they didn't. Humans were far more resilient and resourceful than the fairies gave them credit for. Grabbing her research data and a few essential items, Elena steeled herself for what was to come. The fairies may have started this war, but humanity would not go down without a fight. As she slipped out of the lab into the chaos-filled streets, Elena swore to herself that she would find a way to turn the tables on their magical oppressors. The war for Earth's future had begun, and the fate of humanity now hung in the balance between the ancient power of fairy magic and the indomitable spirit of human ingenuity. The betrayal unveiled. The world erupted into chaos as the fairies launched their surprise attack. Major cities across the globe were engulfed in shimmering domes of magical energy, cutting them off from the outside world. Within these barriers, fairy forces moved with ruthless efficiency, neutralizing military installations and communication centers. In Washington, D.C., President Evelyn Marsh stood in the White House Situation Room, her face ashen as reports of fairy aggression poured in from every corner of the globe. The room buzzed with frantic activity as military leaders and advisors scrambled to coordinate a response. Madam President, General Marcus Steele reported grimly, "Our conventional weapons are having minimal effect on their magical barriers. Aircraft that attempt to penetrate the domes simply disappear. We're effectively blind and deaf to what's happening inside." President Marsh's jaw tightened. "What about our fairy allies here in D.C.? Lysander." "Gone, ma'am. Along with every other fairy diplomat worldwide. They vanished the moment the attacks began." As the gravity of the situation sank in, a young lieutenant burst into the room. "Madam President, General, you need to see this." The screens in the Situation Room flickered to life, showing a global broadcast. Lysander's face filled the display, his once friendly expression now cold and imperious. "People of Earth," he began, his voice resonating with magical authority, "your reign over this world has come to an end. For too long, we have watched as you squandered the gifts of your planet. No more. The Fae realm now claims dominion over Earth. Resist and you will be crushed. Submit, and you may yet have a place in the new order we will build." As the broadcast ended, the room erupted into a cacophony of voices. President Marsh raised her hand, silencing the chaos. "General Steele, initiate Operation Shadowfall. We planned for the possibility of betrayal. Now it's time to act." Across the globe, hidden bunkers deep underground began to stir to life. These facilities, shielded from magical detection, housed humanity's contingency plan, a select group of scientists, soldiers, and leaders chosen to carry on the fight should the worst happen. In one such bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Elena Rees found herself surrounded by a team of Earth's brightest minds and most capable warriors. The facility hummed with activity as they took stock of their resources and began to analyze the full extent of the fairy invasion. Colonel Sora Chen, a decorated Special Forces officer, approached Elena. "Dr. Rees, I understand you have crucial information about the fairies' capabilities." Elena nodded, pulling up her research on a secure terminal. Yes, I discovered discrepancies in their displayed abilities just before the attack. They've been careful to hide their true strengths and weaknesses. But more importantly, I believe their magic operates on principles we can understand and potentially counteract. As Elena explained her findings, a spark of hope ignited among the assembled team. They might be outgunned and overwhelmed, but they weren't outsmarted yet. Meanwhile, above ground, the situation grew dire. Fairy forces, led by powerful mages, began systematic sweeps of human populations. Those who resisted were subdued with paralyzing spells, while the compliant were herded into designated zones. In London, a group of humans attempted to fight back, led by Royal Marine Commando Jack Foster. They had managed to cobble together an improvised EMP device, hoping it might disrupt fairy magic. As a patrol of winged fairies approached, Jack activated the device. For a brief moment, it seemed to work. The fairies' luminous auras flickered, and they dropped a few feet in altitude. But the effect was short-lived. The patrol leader, recovering quickly, fixed Jack with a cold stare. "Foolish humans," she sneered, raising her hand. A pulse of energy erupted from her palm, sending Jack and his compatriots crumpling to the ground, unconscious. Back in the Rocky Mountain bunker, Elena and her team worked tirelessly to unravel the secrets of fairy magic. They pored over every scrap of data collected during the months of peaceful interaction, looking for any edge they could find. Dr. Aisha Patel, a quantum physicist, made a breakthrough. "Elena, look at this. The energy signatures of their spells, they're not continuous. There are microsecond gaps, almost like a pulsing current." Elena's eyes widened as she examined the data. "You're right. It's as if they're constantly refreshing their magical effects. If we could disrupt that rhythm." As they delved deeper into this discovery, an alert sounded through the bunker. Colonel Chen's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "We've got incoming. A fairy search party has detected our shielding. All personnel, battle stations, this is not a drill." The bunker's defenders rushed to their positions, armed with conventional weapons and a few prototype anti-magic devices based on Elena's early research. As they braced for impact, Elena and her team worked feverishly to refine their findings into a workable defense. The first magical assault hit the bunker's outer doors like a thunderclap. Reinforced steel groaned under the strain of forces it was never designed to withstand. Colonel Chen barked orders to her troops, positioning them for maximum coverage. Through it all, Elena felt a mix of terror and determination. The fairies had unleashed this war, thinking humanity would crumble before their superior magic. But as she looked around at the resolute faces of soldiers and scientists working in desperate harmony, she knew the fairies had made a grave miscalculation. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to take the impossible and make it possible. As the fairy assault intensified, Elena swore that they would find a way not just to survive, but to fight back. The battle for the Rocky Mountain bunker was about to begin, and with it, the first true test of humanity's resistance against the fairy invaders. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, with the hopes of billions resting on the shoulders of those few who remained free to fight. Resistance and innovation. The battle for the Rocky Mountain bunker raged for hours. Fairy magic clashed against human determination and ingenuity, creating a cacophony of explosions, energy discharges, and the steady rhythm of gunfire. Colonel Chen's forces held the line with grim resolve, their conventional weapons supplemented by hastily developed anti-magic prototypes. Dr. Elena Rees worked frantically in the heart of the bunker, coordinating with her team to refine their defenses in real time. As each wave of fairy attacks hit, they gathered new data, adjusting their countermeasures on the fly. "The pulse disruptors are working," shouted Dr. Patel over the din of battle. "We're seeing a 30% reduction in the effectiveness of their offensive spells." Elena nodded, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "Good, but it's not enough. We need to push it further." As the fight wore on, the fairies' frustration became evident. What should have been a quick overwhelming of the human stronghold had turned into a costly, protracted engagement. Lysander himself, monitoring the battle from afar, felt the first stirrings of doubt. How are they resisting us? He demanded of his lieutenants. These are mere humans. Back in the bunker, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Private First Class Zoe Rodriguez, a young soldier with a background in electrical engineering, approached Elena with an idea. "Dr. Rees," she said, breathless from the fighting, "what if we modulate the disruptor frequency to match their magical pulses exactly, but half a cycle out of phase?" Elena's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. Destructive interference. So, you're a genius. With renewed energy, the science team raced to implement the modification. As they worked, Colonel Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. "We can't hold them much longer. Whatever you're doing down there, do it fast." Minutes felt like hours as Elena and her team made the final adjustments. Just as the bunker's outer defenses began to crumble, they activated the modified disruptors. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Fairy spells fizzled mid-cast, their wings faltered, and for the first time since the invasion began, the immortal beings knew fear. Unable to maintain their assault without magic, the fairy forces retreated in disarray. As the dust settled, a cheer went up from the human defenders. They had done it. They had repelled a fairy attack. News of the victory spread like wildfire through the hidden network of human resistance. From underground bunkers and secret bases around the world, survivors began to rally. The Rocky Mountain team shared their breakthrough, and soon, makeshift anti-magic devices were being cobbled together from whatever electronics could be salvaged. In the fairy-occupied zones, the first whispers of human retaliation began to circulate. Small acts of sabotage escalated into daring raids on fairy outposts. Humanity, it seemed, refused to go quietly into the night. Lysander, ensconced in his floating citadel above what was once New York City, raged at his commanders. How is this possible? They are primitives, barely out of their caves by our standards. Aria, the young fairy who had once questioned the invasion, spoke up cautiously. "Perhaps we underestimated them, my lord. Their adaptability, their drive to survive, it's unlike anything we've encountered before." Lysander's eyes flashed dangerously, but he held his tongue. Deep down, he knew she was right. As weeks turned to months, the tide of war began to shift. Human resistance cells, armed with increasingly sophisticated anti-magic technology, launched coordinated strikes against fairy strongholds. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled the fires of hope and defiance. In the Rocky Mountain bunker, now serving as the de facto headquarters of the human resistance, Elena and her team worked tirelessly to push their advantage. They developed portable EMPs tuned to disrupt fairy magic, shields that could deflect all but the strongest spells, and sensors capable of detecting magical signatures from miles away. But it wasn't just about defense anymore. Elena knew that to truly turn the tide, they needed to take the fight to the fairies. "We need to find a way to close their portals," she announced to the War Council. "As long as they have access to their realm, they can keep bringing in reinforcements and resources." The challenge was daunting, but the combined intellect of humanity's brightest minds was formidable. They pored over every scrap of data on fairy magic, every legend and myth that might hold a grain of truth. As they worked, reports came in from around the globe of an unexpected development. Some fairies, disillusioned with the war and impressed by human resilience, began to defect. These turncoats brought with them invaluable intelligence and a deeper understanding of fairy magic. One such defector, a young fairy named Thorn, proved particularly helpful. "Your world, your very existence, challenges everything we thought we knew," he explained to a rapt audience of human scientists and leaders. "Some of us have begun to question whether this war is just or even necessary." With Thorn's help, Elena and her team made a startling discovery. The fairy portals weren't just gateways. They were the source of the invaders' magical power on Earth. close the portals, and the fairies would be cut off not just from reinforcements, but from the wellspring of their abilities. As the resistance formulated plans to strike at these vital linkages, Lysander felt the noose tightening. His invasion, once thought unassailable, was now in real danger of collapse. In a desperate bid to regain the upper hand, he ordered an all-out assault on major human population centers. "Break their spirit," he commanded, "and their resistance will crumble." But as fairy war parties descended on cities around the world, they met not cowering masses, but organized, determined resistance. Ordinary citizens, armed with makeshift anti-magic devices, stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers. The streets that the fairies had expected to sweep through became bloody battlegrounds. In London, Jack Foster, the Marine who had once been so easily defeated, now led a battalion equipped with the latest human-fairy hybrid technology. They pushed the invaders back street by street, their weapons nullifying fairy magic and shattering their once impenetrable shields. Similar scenes played out in New York, Tokyo, Lagos, and dozens of other cities. Humanity had been backed into a corner, and now it was fighting back with everything it had. As the global counteroffensive gained momentum, Elena knew they were approaching a tipping point. The next phase of the war would determine the fate of both species and of Earth itself. With grim determination, she turned to Colonel Chen. "It's time. Send the word out. Operation Earthfall is a go." The final battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The tide turns. Operation Earthfall was humanity's boldest gambit yet, a coordinated global assault on the fairy portals that served as both gateways and power sources for the invaders. As the operation commenced, the world held its breath, knowing that the outcome would determine the fate of both species. Elena Rees found herself in the heart of the action, embedded with a strike team led by Colonel Chen. Their target, a massive portal hovering above the ruins of Chicago. As their stealth aircraft approached under the cover of night, Elena clutched the device that represented humanity's best hope, a resonance disruptor designed to destabilize and ultimately collapse the portal. 2 minutes to target, Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "All teams, final equipment check." Elena ran her hands over the disruptor, double-checking every connection. Beside her, Thorn the fairy defector looked on with a mix of anticipation and dread. "Your technology is remarkable," he murmured. "In all our years of watching your kind, we never imagined you capable of this." Before Elena could respond, anti-aircraft fire erupted around them. Fairy defenders had spotted their approach. Evasive maneuvers, Chen barked, and the aircraft banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage of magical projectiles. As they neared the portal, Elena got her first clear view of it, a swirling vortex of energy, easily a mile wide, suspended in the air like a second sun. Fairy ships swarmed around it, pouring out of the gateway to reinforce the Earthside defenses. "We're not going to be able to get close enough," Chen growled, frustration evident in her voice. Elena's mind raced. Then an idea struck her. "We don't have to," she said, turning to Thorn. "Can you fly us there?" The fairy's eyes widened in understanding. "Yes, but the risk is worth it," Elena finished. She turned to Chen. "Colonel, we need a distraction, something big." Chen nodded grimly. "Oh, I've got just the thing." She keyed her radio. "All units, initiate Operation Fireworks." Suddenly, the sky lit up as human forces launched a massive barrage of missiles and anti-magic weaponry. The fairy defenses scattered, drawn away from the portal to deal with a multi-pronged assault. In the chaos, Elena and Thorn slipped out of the aircraft. With the disruptor strapped to her back, Elena clung to Thorn as he flew them towards the portal, dodging stray spells and debris. As they neared their target, Elena activated the disruptor. The device hummed to life, sending out waves of energy that visibly distorted the portal's surface. Fairy ships emerging from the gateway began to lose control, some disappearing back into the vortex, others spiraling towards the ground. It's working, Elena shouted over the din of battle, but their success had not gone unnoticed. A group of fairy warriors, led by a mage with crackling energy surrounding his hands, flew towards them with deadly intent. Thorn banked hard, narrowly avoiding a blast of magical energy. "I can't avoid them and keep us in range," he yelled. Elena gritted her teeth. "Then don't avoid them. Take us closer." With a nod of understanding, Thorn flew directly at the oncoming fairies. At the last second, he barrel-rolled, allowing Elena to unleash a burst from a handheld anti-magic pulse gun. The leaf fairies tumbled from the sky, their wings temporarily paralyzed. But the mage proved more resilient. With a snarl of rage, he hurled a bolt of pure magical force at them. Thorn tried to dodge, but the blast caught his wing. As they began to fall, Elena saw the portal flickering, edges crumbling. "We're so close," she muttered, frantically adjusting the disruptor's settings. The ground was approaching fast, the mage preparing for a finishing blow. Suddenly, a roar filled the air. Jack Foster, piloting a hybrid human-fairy craft, swooped in, unleashing a barrage that sent the mage tumbling away. "Thought you could use a hand, Doc." His voice crackled over Elena's calm. With renewed determination, Thorn righted their flight, pushing through the pain to bring them within feet of the destabilizing portal. Elena cranked the disruptor to maximum power, praying it would be enough. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the portal began to collapse in on itself. Fairy ships scrambled to escape, many being sucked back into the closing vortex. "We need to go now," Thorn shouted, already banking away from the implosion. As they retreated, Elena watched in awe as the massive portal shrank to a pinpoint before winking out of existence with a final thunderous boom. The shockwave caught them, sending them tumbling through the air before Jack's ship swooped in to catch them. Around the world, similar scenes played out as humanity's forces struck at fairy portals with their newfound weapons and tactics. One by one, the gateways fell, cutting off the invaders' reinforcements and power supply. In his floating citadel, Lysander watched in disbelief as reports of portal collapses flooded in. The unthinkable was happening. His invincible armada was being defeated by the very beings he had dismissed as primitive. As fairy forces found themselves suddenly cut off from their magic, the tide of battle shifted dramatically. Human resistance fighters, long pushed to the brink, surged forward with renewed vigor. Cities under fairy control erupted in rebellion, aided by the anti-magic technology that had leveled the playing field. In the skies above Chicago, Elena allowed herself a moment of hope as she watched fairy ships falling from the sky, their occupants powerless without the portal's energy. But she knew the war was far from over. Lysander and his inner circle remained a formidable threat, and pockets of fairy resistance still held strong in various parts of the globe. As the human forces regrouped, preparing for the next phase of the conflict, Elena turned to Thorn. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing words couldn't fully express her gratitude for his sacrifice. The fairy nodded, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "Perhaps," he said softly, "this is the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples." Elena smiled, daring to imagine a future where humans and fairies could coexist peacefully. But first, they had a war to win and a planet to reclaim. As reports of victories poured in from around the world, humanity dared to believe that the impossible was within reach. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. The fairy invasion, meant to subjugate Earth, had instead awakened a sleeping giant. With renewed determination, Elena and her team began planning the final push to liberate their world. The endgame was approaching and humanity was ready to fight for its rightful place among the stars. Battle for Earth's soul. The global counteroffensive against the fairy invaders gained momentum with each passing day. Humanity, once on the brink of subjugation, now pushed back with a ferocity that surprised even their own leaders. Cities were liberated one by one, with civilian militias fighting alongside professional soldiers, all armed with the anti-magic technology that had turned the tide of war. In the Rocky Mountain bunker, now serving as the central command for Earth's defense, Dr. Elena Rees pored over tactical displays with General Steele and Colonel Chen. Holographic maps showed the steady advance of human forces, punctuated by pockets of fierce fairy resistance. Lysander's forces are consolidating around their remaining strongholds, General Steele observed, pointing to clusters of red indicators. They're dug in deep, especially around the major ley lines. Elena nodded grimly. They're trying to tap directly into Earth's magical energy. It's a desperate move, but it could give them the power to open new portals. Colonel Chen's eyes narrowed. Then we hit them hard and fast. We can't give them time to regroup. As they finalized plans for the next phase of the offensive, an alert sounded. A fairy transmission was broadcasting on all frequencies. The holographic display flickered, and Lysander's face appeared, his once regal features now haggard and fierce. "Humans of Earth," he began, his voice a mixture of rage and desperation. "You have fought well, I'll grant you that. But do not think for a moment that this war is over. Even now, we prepare a spell that will reshape your world in our image. Surrender now, and you may yet have a place in the new order. Resist, and watch as your precious Earth is torn asunder." The transmission cut off, leaving a tense silence in its wake. Elena was the first to speak. "He's bluffing. He has to be." But doubt gnawed at her. What if Lysander truly had found a way to harness Earth's ley lines on a global scale? The destruction could be catastrophic. General Steele's voice cut through her thoughts. "Bluff or not, we can't take the risk. We need to launch our final assault now." The next hours were a blur of activity as humanity mobilized for what they hoped would be the last battle of the war. Strike teams were assembled, each targeting a fairy stronghold. Elena found herself once again paired with Thorn, the fairy defector whose insights had proven invaluable. As they boarded a transport bound for Lysander's main citadel, now grounded in the ruins of New York City, Elena felt a mix of determination and trepidation. This was it. The fate of Earth would be decided in the coming battle. The assault began at dawn. Across the globe, human forces struck at fairy strongholds with everything they had. In New York, Elena's team fought their way through the twisted, magic-warped streets of Manhattan, pushing towards Lysander's citadel. The fairy defenses were fierce. Despite being cut off from their realm, they had indeed tapped into Earth's ley lines, giving them access to wild, unpredictable magic. Buildings warped and shifted, gravity reversed itself in localized pockets, and reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. Elena's anti-magic devices worked overtime, barely keeping up with the onslaught. Beside her, Thorn used his innate understanding of fairy magic to predict and counter the most dangerous spells. As they neared the citadel, a bone-chilling howl filled the air. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the sky darkened ominously. "He's starting the spell," Thorn shouted, his face pale with fear. "If we don't stop him now, your world is doomed." With renewed urgency, they pushed forward. Human soldiers clashed with fairy warriors in the shadow of the towering citadel. The air crackled with energy as magic and technology collided in a spectacular display of light and sound. Elena and Thorn fought their way to the citadel's main entrance, only to find it sealed by a shimmering magical barrier. As they searched for a way through, a familiar voice rang out. "I must admit, I'm impressed." Lysander descended from above, his wings spread wide, crackling with stolen earth magic. "You've proven far more resilient than we ever imagined, but it ends here." With a gesture, he sent a wave of pure magical force towards them. Elena activated her strongest shield, barely deflecting the blast. The concrete beneath her feet cracked and bubbled from the residual energy. "Why?" Elena shouted as she dodged another attack. "Why invade us in the first place? We could have been allies." Lysander laughed bitterly. "Allies? With creatures who destroy their own world? We came to save Earth from you, to restore the balance you so carelessly disrupted. By enslaving us. Elena retorted, firing her anti-magic pulse gun. Lysander deflected it easily, but the distraction allowed Thorn to flank him. Sometimes to heal, one must first cut out the infection, Lysander snarled, engaging Thorn in aerial combat. As Fairy and Defector clashed above, Elena worked frantically to breach the Citadel's defenses. She could feel the build-up of magical energy, knew that Lysander's world-altering spell was nearing completion. Suddenly, Thorn's voice rang out in pain. Elena looked up to see him plummeting, one wing badly damaged by Lysander's attack. Without thinking, she leaped to catch him, cushioning his fall but leaving herself exposed. Lysander swooped down, magic gathering around his hands for a killing blow. It's over, human. Your resistance ends here. But as he prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. The magic around his hands flickered and died. Lysander's eyes widened in shock and fear. Behind him, the Citadel's barrier fell, revealing Jack Foster and a team of human soldiers. In Jack's hands was a device Elena recognized. A localized version of the portal disruptor, calibrated to sever connections to ley lines. No, Lysander howled, realizing his defeat. But it was too late. Without access to Earth's magic, he was powerless. As human forces swarmed the Citadel, Elena approached the fallen fairy lord. It's over, Lysander. Earth is not yours to save or rule. It's our home, and we'll defend it, from you or any other threat. Around the world, similar scenes played out as the last fairy strongholds fell. With their leader captured and their magic neutralized, the remaining invaders had no choice but to surrender. As the dust settled on the battlefield that was once New York City, Elena looked out at the devastation, but also at the first signs of rebuilding. Humans and reformed fairies worked side by side, clearing rubble and tending to the wounded. The war was over, but the real work of healing, for both Earth and its people, was just beginning. As she watched the sunrise over the scarred but unbroken skyline, Elena allowed herself to hope for a future where the best of both worlds could come together to build something truly magical. A new era dawns. In the months following Lysander's defeat, Earth began the long process of recovery and rebuilding. The scars of the fairy invasion were deep, both physical and psychological, but humanity's resilience shone through even in the darkest of times. Dr. Elena Rees found herself at the center of a new initiative, the HFY Reconciliation Council. Alongside Thorn and other fairy defectors, she worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the two species. It was a monumental task, fraught with mistrust and painful memories on both sides. One crisp autumn morning, Elena stood before the newly reconstructed United Nations headquarters in New York. The building was a testament to human ingenuity, incorporating both advanced technology and carefully regulated fairy magic in its design. As she prepared to address the global assembly, she couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. Representatives of Earth and the Fae realm, she began, her voice carrying to millions watching worldwide, we stand at a crossroads. The war that nearly destroyed us all has ended, but its legacy lives on. We have a choice to make, to let the bitterness of the past dictate our future, or to forge a new path together. As she spoke, Elena could see the mix of emotions on the faces before her. Human leaders sat side by side with reformed fairy delegates, their expressions ranging from cautious optimism to lingering suspicion. We've learned much from each other, she continued. The fairies have shown us the wonders of magic, the importance of living in harmony with our world, and we, in turn, have demonstrated the power of innovation, of adapting and overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. In the audience, Thorn nodded encouragingly. Beside him sat Jack Foster, now a decorated war hero and a strong advocate for human-fairy cooperation. But our greatest lesson, Elena emphasized, is that neither magic nor technology alone is the answer. It's when we combine our strengths, when we work together despite our differences, that we achieve the truly extraordinary. She gestured to a holographic display showcasing joint human-fairy projects around the world. Polluted areas were being restored at unprecedented rates, clean energy solutions were revolutionizing industry, and medical breakthroughs were saving lives that would have been lost just months ago. The invasion nearly cost us everything, Elena acknowledged, her voice solemn. But in rising to meet that challenge, we've discovered potential within ourselves that we never knew existed. Now we have the opportunity to use that potential not for war, but for the betterment of all. As she concluded her speech, the assembly hall erupted in applause. It wasn't the universal acceptance she'd hoped for. There were still pockets of resistance, hardliners on both sides who viewed cooperation with suspicion. But it was a start. In the years that followed, the alliance between humans and fairies grew stronger. The remaining ley line access points were carefully regulated, with joint teams of human scientists and fairy mages studying ways to harness their power responsibly. Lysander and the other architects of the invasion faced justice, but even this process became a lesson in reconciliation. Instead of punishment, they were sentenced to work alongside humans in restoring the damage their war had caused. Many, over time, came to understand the error of their ways and became advocates for peace. Technology and magic blended in ways once thought impossible. Hospitals utilized fairy healing techniques alongside advanced medical equipment. Terraforming projects restored ecosystems at astonishing rates. And in orbit, the first joint human-fairy space station heralded a new era of exploration. But perhaps the most profound changes were the subtler ones. Children grew up in a world where magic was as commonplace as electricity, where having wings didn't make one strange or threatening. Schools taught both computer programming and basic spellcasting. The boundaries between the two species began to blur as understanding and even love bridged the gap. 5 years to the day after the war's end, Elena stood on the balcony of her home, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant hues, more vibrant than she remembered from her youth, a result she knew of the cleaner air and restored ozone layer. Thorn landed beside her, his wings folding gracefully. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly. Elena nodded, leaning against him. Their relationship had been unexpected, a symbol of the new world they were building. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how far we've come," she mused. "And how far we still have to go," Thorn added with a smile. "The first human fairy colony on Mars breaks ground next month. Who would have thought?" As they watched the stars begin to twinkle into view, Elena felt a profound sense of hope. The fairy invasion had brought Earth to the brink of destruction, but in rising to meet that challenge, humanity had unlocked its true potential. The road ahead was long, and not without its challenges, but as the light of distant worlds shimmered in the darkening sky, Elena knew that together, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The war was over. A new age of magic and science, of cooperation and understanding had begun, and the future, vast and full of possibilities, awaited.